sure should know, but he might not should attempt it on these severely foundered horses, because it's something you have to know what's normal and really know what's normal before you should attempt to do some of the horses like you will see on these slides today. Some of it becomes very, very complicated. You have to work closely with the veterinarian. Some of these things get so complicated it gets into doing a lot of blood work. You can't fix one of these horses' feet if he's sick internally, so you have to work closely with a veterinarian. Founder or laminitis has always been thought just old Robin got in the grain bin and his feet got sore, and then he got the so-called rotation and normally the horse is destroyed. But we have so many different things that cause this malady in the equine world, and in fact all the hoofed animals of the world have this problem. It's just more prevalent in the equine species than it is in the others. But it gets very, very complicated. So what you see today, see that we can fix most of these kind of horses. Imagine what you can do if you just put a simple, what we call a heart bar shoe on them a day or two after they come up with laminitis. And I want to differentiate the term laminitis and founder. Laminitis, it means inflammation of the lamina. In other words, when we have an infarction or cutting off of the laminar vessels that feed the lamina its blood supply, then day number one, the horse has laminitis. He's very sore, but he...
Let me turn that off. We're picking up some music in the background.
See, can you all hear all right without this thing?
Well, that was very distracting.
That's a lot better, Rob.
I didn't realize that until I was told off, so I'm sorry about that.
The founder is secondary to laminitis. In other words, founder is an old maritime term that means sinking. If you're on a foundering ship, that means the boat's going to the bottom. You better get your life jacket on. And for all the years that I've been around, we have never differentiated between the terminology between laminitis and founder. All of you have heard about Dr. So-and-so that went out and treated the foundered horse, and he gave him shots 3 days in a row, and the horse got well. You can treat laminitis many times with a drug and get the horse over it. Once the horse founders, though, you cannot treat it with a drug. You can't fix a broken bone with a drug. That bone has to be stabilized, either with a splint or a cast, before you can get the bone to heal back in a normal fashion. So that's where the heart bar shoe comes along. If you have a horse with laminitis and you do not know whether this horse is going to go into a founder condition, if you put your heart bar on there early enough, many, many times you don't get the complete tearing and separation of the lamina like you do with putting an egg bar shoe or nailing a shoe on backward or putting a pad on the horse. If you get it on, even if you just take the roll of gauze to this horse's frog, like the veterinarian, he sees the horse before the farrier sees it. So if he'll just carry some old indoor-outdoor carpet along and cut it in a triangle-shaped piece, and the day he sees the horse just stack this indoor-outdoor carpet up on the frog and tape it up with some good elasticon tape, anything to give an arch support effect to the horse's foot. You don't want to put any pressure on the sole, because that essentially, if this horse does sink in or rotate, you essentially put a tourniquet on the bottom of the horse's foot. So if we turn off the lights, I'll bore you for a few minutes with some anatomy slides that show the blood vascular system of the horse's foot. I know many of you have seen this part of the program probably before, but there's a lot of people that haven't seen it, and it's very, very important, and even if you have seen it once, it doesn't hurt to refresh your memory. Many of us, when we were in college, when we walked out of anatomy and algebra, we forgot all about it. But if we're going to shoe horses, the anatomy of the lower leg is extremely important. Here, these two arteries do not lay underneath the frog at all. They lay out here underneath the sole. Along about this point right here, these two arteries go in through two foramina, or two holes in the third phalanx, where they come apart, come around, and an anastomosis connect together to form what's called a terminal arch. And I don't think those are $10 words. There's just not any other name for them. So don't think it's a big fancy word. There's just not any other name for this stuff. This is the circumflex vein and artery that runs right around the peripheral edge of the third phalanx. Now, when a horse becomes a foundered horse and this bone sinks and or rotates downward, this main circumflex vein and artery becomes squeezed off between the distal end of the third phalanx and the horny sole, therefore cutting off this blood supply right out in here. Therefore, we lose a lot of the blood supply to the anterior tip of our third phalanx. This is why on an old chronic thing, that many times if you've ever seen an x-ray of one, the entire tip of this bone on the lateral view will either be gone or it will be all turned up and remodeled because this blood supply has been compromised. Now then, you can see that if we've got a horse that's foundered and sinking or rotating, and we put a pad or a hoof cast or anything on the bottom of the foot, we might keep the bone in that position as far as a radiographic study. But inside the hoof capsule, the action is still going on. So all this massive blood supply is permanently squeezed off because the fingernail or the hoof wall of the horse is no longer attached to the bone. Next slide. This is just a lateral view schematic diagram showing a horny wall. Here's our coronary plexus, or cuticle as I refer to it a lot of times to an owner. This is the lamina. This lamina holds the entire weight of this horse up. How many times have you ever had a horse with a bad sole abscess and the whole sole will fall out of this horse, yet the horse is not founded? This is the weight-bearing structures. This lamina and this wall are the weight-bearing structures of the foot. You can take the whole sole out of the horse, he still won't drop out the bottom. The sole is actually supporting very, very little of the horse's weight. Again, showing how this circumflex vein goes around here. If this third phalanx drops down, you can see that it's going to become squeezed off right in this area, thus losing a lot of the blood supply to the distal end of this bone. This is the dorsal artery and vein of the third phalanx, just a cutaway view showing it. This shows how our arteries come down and come back in to the foot. Okay. This is a schematic diagram of how, notice this part of the corium is right next to the third phalanx, right next to the bone itself. Notice the size of these arteries and veins that come out here. And as we get more out toward the lamina, each further section we get out, the veins and arteries become smaller until we get out here. So these veins and arteries are very microscopic. In fact, Dr. Lug Leach of Canada is one of the few men that I know of that has a real good electron microscope picture of the laminar vessels themselves. And these are the vessels, when a horse gets laminitis, these are the vessels that are mainly affected in the initial insult, the initial insult of the problem. We get an infarction or cutting off of these laminar vessels. These lamina die, letting the bone drop down through, rotate in or sink. Okay. Here's a schematic diagram. This doesn't show the laminar vessels, but you can imagine the hoof being out here where on a normal foot. All of a sudden, this whole thing sinks down inside the hoof capsule or rotates. This jams the fingernail into this massive venous plexus of the coronary band, or the cuticle as we refer to it a lot of times, thus effectively cutting off this blood supply to the cuticle and the foot slumps because the fingernail is actually jamming into this massive area here. Okay? Look backwards. Okay, this is what we call an arteriogram. These arteries were injected with the dye, and then we take a zero radiograph of this thing. It's called a xerography. Many of you may have never seen one of these type of x-rays, but they show a lot more detail than a normal negative type x-ray. But again, this shows how the digital arteries come down through the back, where they go in under here. Here they are where they're going. They pass through the foramina. This is the dorsal artery that was on the schematic diagram, how it shows up. And if you'll notice, all this vascularity that's underneath here If this bone sinks down, all this becomes squeezed off, and you get massive asepsis, or massive abscesses in the sole of this foot when all this is torn loose. Again, this is the hoof wall, so you can see that if this bony column is coming here, this hoof wall going up here, it jams this area of the coronary band, thus cutting off the blood supply. This is why we get such a rapid heel growth in a lot of these foundered horses when the bone rotates, and we get no toe growth here because this toe fingernail or toe hoof wall jams into that at the toe, cutting this blood supply off. The only where we've got a blood supply left to our coronary band is at the heel, so we get a rapid heel growth with the growth rings that look like that. We have a brand new heel and no toe growth. And if you leave this on there, it effectively will kill all this coronary plexus in time, and you never will be able to grow a new fingernail. Go ahead. This is obviously this horse is dead, but this horse was injected with a dye, and then the foot was frozen. Then it was cut into transverse sections. This being the tip of the toe. This just shows the wall. All these dark lines are the blood supply to the venous plexus of the sole. This is the tip of the third phalanx with your circumflex vein and arteries. The dark blue is all mainly arteries in this case. So you can now see that if this bone is no longer attached to the fingernail and it drops down, it effectively cuts off this blood supply. And if you put a pad on this horse, you restrict this blood supply so that it never will be able to return and heal back in a proper fashion. This is looking back further posterior from the toe of the horse, showing again the palmar digital arteries, how they go into the hoof. These are inside the bone in foramina. But we've all been taught another thing, the key to this slide right here, we've all been taught that the frog is a major blood pump to the hoof. The frog doesn't anymore pump any blood than one of those posts do because there is no major blood supply, as you can see of this frog. This is out toward the tip of the frog. And there's not a big blood supply. So you can put a lot of support on this frog and not cause any pressure necrosis as you would if you put pressure out here on the horse's sole. So you can use this frog as an arch support to support this whole bony column. This is just further back toward the heel. Here again is your palmar digital arteries that go in through there unprotected, virtually unprotected by any bone. They're just covered up with cartilage, horny sole, and a little bit of blood supply. Again, here's our frog that lays in here. And notice it has very little vascularity in it. Very, very minute capillaries if there is any at all. Notice the big vessels in the venous plexus of the sole here and here as we get back further toward the heel. Okay. This is just a blown up view of the same picture so that you can really see that this bone sinks and it squeezes all this blood supply off between the horny sole and the bone. And we've got a pad on this and this foot's flat, or if we've got a bar that runs across here, or if we put a hoof cast on it, then we're going to permanently cut this blood supply off, and it never will return if we've got something like a tourniquet. Again, this shows a little vascularity of this frog, but you have all this extra cushion that you can put a lot of support on to support that entire bone, and that's where this is the most scientific part about putting on a heart bar shoe. Okay. That's just a blown-up view of the same picture so that you can see both sides. Okay. This is another angiogram showing again where people might not believe the diagram. This is on a regular horse's foot showing how these arteries come down, the palmar digital arteries where they pass through the foramina of the third phalanx. They're encased in bone here. Your frog lays in this area here. This again is the circumflex vein and artery that runs around the anterior edge of the bone. And if you can just imagine this in a rotated horse and this being squeezed off and a pad put on it, that this vascularity can never return in any kind of a normal fashion. You just have continual abscess problems and asepsis on the horse if you cover this thing up out here with a lot of pressure on it. Okay, this is a normal foot. I'm sorry I don't have it on complete the slide, but this, notice there's no distance between the fingernail and the third phalanx in this picture. You'll notice our frog, how far forward it runs, and how much cushion we have underneath our frog in this particular slide. Okay, on this picture, we have the laminitic organ. Now this, notice the coloration of this bone. We've lost a lot of the blood supply to this bone, so we're getting quite a lot of necrosis taking place in this. The bone is already prolapsed through the sole. Notice how the fingernail is jamming into the cuticle right at the coronary plexus right in this area. This horse could probably, a lot of times we'll call this a rotation of the third phalanx. This horse does not have a rotation of the third phalanx. If you'll notice, the first, second, and third phalanx are basically all still in the line. We take an x-ray of this foot and we see the distance is greater between here and here than it is here and here. We've been calling that a rotation. It's not. I'll explain the difference in a little while. This is just severe edematous swelling of this lamina. And that's one of the reasons as we go along later that we want to do the hoof resection. All this pressure from this dead tissue is building up inside the hoof capsule. And that hoof capsule won't give very much. It'll push out here a little bit enough to jam our coronary band. And it will finally get to where it puts so much pressure that it actually helps push this bone back this way. Plus the fact that we've got this deep flexor tendon that can get involved if we don't get this loose. And then this bone will really drop down and not be in alignment with P1 to it and P1 and 2. So that's one of the reasons that we do the hoof resection, is to get rid of this, get in there and treat this like an open wound. There's no blood supply here. You get all this abscess, you can give it antibiotics till you're blue in the face, or the neck, the vein, or the butt. Won't do any good. There's no blood supply to carry that antibiotic down to that foot. Okay? Okay, that's a sleepy dog. This is a horse that, some of these slides were selected because some of these horses are in the Kentucky, Indiana area, and some of the boys have worked on these horses, and I thought it would be interesting if they saw some of these pictures to see how bad some of these horses were when we started on 4 or 5 years ago. This is a 2-year-old Arabian mare. You can see that the bone is prolapsed through the sole. We've already done our frontal hoof resection on this thing. First, to remove the hoof wall so that we can debride or remove the necrotic lamina that's between the bone and the wall. Number 2, this filly had a true rotation of the third phalanx. When we put our horseshoe on, we wanted to push the bone back, put it back in that position, so we didn't want to have any resistance on the front. If we put the heart bar on before we did the resection, then we'd have mashed or squeezed or compressed all that necrotic edematous lamina, and we would have caused more pain. The third reason we did it, as you'll see on the pictures in a minute, was to relieve the coronary plexus. And the fourth reason for doing this is to relieve pain. And this is all the whole corium of the third phalanx. This whole sole that's left is undermined clear back to the heel. And we just don't did enough on the bottom to establish ventral drainage for them, so that this fluid that's entrapped back here in the sole won't work up the lamina at the heel and break out at the heel. This filly has a real interesting history. A friend of mine from out in the west called me and said, "Horseshoe," and said, "We've got a real badly foundered mare, Burney, and she's very expensive. And she's got this thing on the radiograph that you call a seroma. You look at the radiograph on the lateral view, and a lot of times you'll see a dark line between the wall and the third phalanx, and a lot of people call that an air pocket. Well, you never know what it is. The x-ray doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell you whether that's an air pocket, a hollow spot, or whether it's a liquid in the form of internal hemorrhage like a maxed fingernail. So I instructed my farrier friends he said, "Now, they won't let me cut that horse's foot off like you do." And I said, "Well, before you put your heart ball on, at least drill a hole in the front of this foot through the wall to be sure that's not a liquid." So he and the veterinarian get together, and they get him a drill bit 1/8 of an inch long, 3 inches long, 1/8 of an inch wide, 3 inches long. And I said, "Now, Charlie, if it won't bleed, if it just bleeds a little bit, that's just like if you mash your fingernails, they'll hold it. But you shouldn't get a lot of hemorrhage." Well, they drill a hole right here. They go all the way through the wall, through the lamina, through the bone, and out the bottom. Well, they get tremendous amount of hemorrhage going on, and the mare's kind of raising hell. Big locker, and then they drill another hole here, and then they drill another hole here, and then there was 5 holes, and they really ventilated this third playlet. They called me up about 3 hours later and said, "Boy, we can't get the bleeding stopped. You better come. This thing's just about $450,000." So I get out, and I said, "What'd you do?" I said, "How deep did you drill?" He said, "Well, we went from the middle of the front of the toe, and just like you said, and right out the bottom." Well, I thought we would lose this thing, and my good friend Charlie Hilton's working on her today. That's her foot, Charlie, when we started. Okay. This is the bottom of it again. This is a close-up view showing really no blood there. This is all brand new stuff that stole and was laying under there. Go ahead, we'll kind of go through these in a hurry. Now this is the same foot with the shoe on. You'll notice you can see the tip of the frog sticking out in front of that heart bar. You want at least 3/8 of an inch of frog in front of the heart bar shoe, or you want the heart bar shoe to be 3/8 of an inch back from the point of the frog on one like this. Everybody says the bone's coming through here, so they get mixed up and they put the bone bar 3/8 of an inch in front of the frog, and the horse lays down, and they said it didn't work. Notice that you can see the frog on both sides of this bar. If you make this bar too wide, then you're going to get those deep digital, those palmar digital arteries that I showed you on the anatomy slide a while ago. Be sure that you can see the frog in front of that bar and over. Don't weld your bar in across here or across here, because if the horse happens to sink some more and gets swelling underneath this horny sole, that sole can't give way, and you'll actually cut, the swelling will cut the deep digital, the palmar digital arteries off, and then you lose the whole thing, the bone. When you lose the bone, you're in pretty bad trouble.
Excuse me, did you have a rim pad on that shoe?
Yes, sir, on that particular one. And we'll get into the rim pads later. This is just 30 days later on the same foot. This is back when we used a lot of iodine, 7% iodine, which we don't use anymore, and I'll explain that as we go over. The iodine is too hot and cauterizes live tissue too much. It seals everything up from the outside, and you've got to heal all that stuff from the inside. So go ahead and move. This is a good example of, this is the same filly of how the growth rings were on this filly. This filly had this problem approximately 60 days when we were called to go work on her. Notice we've got a brand new heel, but all that edematous swelling that had been under this fingernail and the way the bone had rotated, it jammed this fingernail into this coronary plexus that I pointed out a while ago. So we have no toe growth in 60 days, and we've got a brand new heel. This is the reason that the ones that survive get the old ski toe, because that foot will grow just like that. And they won't get well if you don't remove that part and stabilize the third phalanx inside the toe capsule. This is the front view of it. Notice we've got our iodine stain. This is 30 days later. We've got this much new heel, new toe growth at this time. Notice we've got the toe of the shoe rolled dramatically like the end of a ski or a sled runner. The reason for doing that, rolling that toe that radical, is to get the breakover fulcrum point as near under the point of the third phalanx as you can, so that it takes less force for the deep flexor tendon to break this horse over and help stabilize the bone in the foot. If you've got this flat, it takes more pressure for the deep flexor tendon to energy for it to break the foot over. Therefore, it's pulling on the bone, because the fingernail's no longer attached to the bone, and there's really no fingernail there left anymore anyway. Here's the same foot the same day after it's cleaned up. Each time that you go back to reset one of these horses, this lamina will be protruded out this way. It's very hard and keratinous, but it grows outward from the bone. So as the new fingernail grows down the first quarter of an inch, and you reset the shoe, you have to debride this lamina back some more, so that as this fingernail grows down, it doesn't have to grow over that lamina that's protruded out. Each time you reset the horse, debride that back until you get your fingernail grown back in a basically good, even line of growth. This is the sole. You can tell that it's detached partly, but just the way the picture's taken. But that's the horny sole, what there is left of it. Okay. This is the other foot. Notice I'm just lifting the horny sole up. This is all exposed coring for the flesh that's covering the tip of the third phalanx. This is on the mare's good foot. You could actually feel the pulse on the first day right here on that vein and artery. That's a good sign, because as long as you can feel a pulse here, you know you haven't destroyed that main artery, which is the circumflex vein and artery. Okay. This is just later on as these pictures go, they're taken in 30-day apart sequences. This is a foot before we clean it up. Okay. This is the other foot before we clean it up. Again, all this black is from the iodine stain that we used back in those days to try to control or dry off the infection. This is the bad foot. Again, this is stained by the iodine, but we've got a new sole. This sole has to regenerate from the back, posterior to anterior. And as each month goes along, the sole, everything's going right, the sole will be a little further forward, the wall will be a little further down, and then the two will meet, and you've got a pretty basic, good looking foot again. Go ahead. Here's the same foot showing how much it's grown. This is probably 60 days into this thing. Notice how our growth rings are starting to even out. We've got the bone stabilized through support on the frog. I hate the term pressure on the frog. Every once in a while I use it. Pressure scares the hell out of an owner, and it really scares the veterinarian, because all I can think about is pressure and necrosis. And you can put the hard bar shoe on there and get too much pressure, but the horse will tell you if you do immediately when you nail the shoe on. But if you'll notice our fingernails starting to grow here in the front, where this was up here, and we had the brand new heel, we now have these growth rings starting to even out, because we've relieved it here, stabilized the bone, we've gotten rid of everything that's in there that's causing us any necrosis or abscess problem, so everything's healing up nicely along about here. This is the front of the same foot. Remember, it was right here, no growth, then this much. Notice we're getting rid of our line, and everything's starting to grow back in a normal fashion. You can take a pocket knife and stick back in these walls here, because they were no longer attached. That fingernail was no longer attached to anything. Here again, just how we're cleaning up the little burr we used to clean up that lamina. As this new fingernail grows down, this lamina's out here. We don't want this fingernail to have to come out here, so we keep this cut back each month. Notice again, our growth rings, instead of being this way, are starting to even out. Still a little more growth at the heel, but as we progress, you'll see that they catch up with each other. Okay. Here it is just later on down the line. Notice now we've got a pretty even heel growth. With toe growth, our toe is really starting to grow and catch up with everything. Again, we're debriding that lamina. You have each month. And it wouldn't hurt if you did it every 10 days. But most of us don't have time to run by there and do this every 10 days. So every 30 days is sufficient to fix one of these horses, where you can certainly get a breedable pasture sample. This is the front of a bad foot that was perforated, and you can still see 3 of the spots where they drilled through there. But notice how much this toe has grown down now. I would say that this is probably 4 months into this thing. This filly didn't put this foot on the ground for the first 90 days. She packed it. She hopped like a kangaroo. And I thought we would get an osteomyelitis or a disease of the bone because of this, but we were very, very lucky and we didn't. And this is a mare that Charlie Hilton is working on today down in Kentucky. Go ahead. This is the good foot on the same mare. All heel under all iodine stain. You'll notice we've got a good, even, good-looking hoof growing back there. A lot of times in the real severe cases like this particular individual, you never get a good blood supply to the lamina right down here in the bottom, so you end up with kind of a seedy area. But as long as the horse is sound, moving good, rideable sound, you don't worry about it. After it gets down in here, you might debride that 2 or 3 more times. In other words, you get your fingernail down to here, you still got a little seedy area, which I'll call a laminar wedge. So you go up there and do another resection and take that out and try to get that fingernail to reattach. On the real severe ones, right at the bottom, that blood supply never returns too good, so you'll have a little seedy toe. But who cares if your horse is sound? Just don't worry about it too much. Again, showing how the growth rings were, how wrinkled this was, and you can I think everybody can see is this jams that coronary band, and all of a sudden you relieve the coronary band, you have a surge of blood supply, and you'll notice now that our heel and toe are growing at the same rate. Go ahead. Okay, that's case number one, and that mare's still alive. She's doing well today, and Charlie Hilton has done a one tremendous job of keeping this mare sound. This is a very interesting case. This mare came to two major veterinary schools. This was the second school that she'd gone to. She laid down so much that the reason she's taped up around here, she worn a hole, an ulcer, a vent sore in her chest cavity. And when she breathed, it was just like a bellow, so they had her all taped up. And this is the way she was when they called me. And I think the reason they call these kind of horses, they want to try to prove that you can't fix something. But anyhow, the thing's been this way for over a year. Pus coming out of both elbows. I mean, you can tell she's in pretty terrible shape. The owner had really tried hard to fix this mare. Now, the horse shearers that have been working on this mare said you can't cut these feet off anymore because the quick grows out. What they were hitting was old bloody hemorrhage in these feet as the fingernail grew out, but the quick does not grow out on a horse. And don't ever let anybody tell you it does. If the quick grew out on a horse, it would grow out on a woman whose fingernails are this long. There's no such thing. That blood supply cannot grow out with the horse's foot. It's there. You might have a foot that long, but the blood supply is not down where it's down here in the bottom of the foot. It's up here where it's supposed to be. Okay? This is the radiograph of this foot before we worked on it. Actually, this film is in there wrong. So she's standing. This is where she's standing on. She's standing on this. Now they're calling this 60, 70 degrees of rotation. There is no rotation in this mare. But notice we've got a severe pedal osteitis at this time because the blood supply to the tip of this third phalanx has been so traumatized and beat up that we're getting a remodeling of the coffin bone. And you can see the abscess tracts that are going up in this foot. And we've got all this distance here. It's not doing us any good. It's just causing us problems. Okay. This is the foot when we get through trimming. And here's the wall now. She's standing on her foot. Now that she's standing on it, we really don't have, this bony column is still in fairly good alignment for something that's this long standing, been this way this long. We've got a bad coffin bone, we all realize that. But we still don't have this real dramatic differentiation between P1, 2, and 3. Okay? This is before we work on it. We'll just quickly run through these to show we don't have much toe growth. Most of this growth out here, that foot's going like this. This is supposed on the bottom of the foot. Okay. So this is with the camera sitting on the ground. Here's the frog. I have to apologize. I'm not a very good photographer. This, you can see the frog, and the camera's right flat on the ground, right out in front of it. It's a pretty good mess. This is the opposite foot. You can take a knife blade and stick it up in there a good inch and a half or so. This is how she's standing. You see, she's standing here. So here's the bony column was right down in here. You saw it on the x-ray a while ago, and I had the x-ray in there backwards. But here's the bottom of the foot. There's the frog. And then they trim on this and get abscesses and internal hemorrhage, and they say you can't trim it anymore. Okay? Here's after we get through with the bottom of it. This is all this raw. This is exuberant tissue that's in that foot. There's really no good blood supply, but this is just real fleshy. Almost looks like proud flesh when we get in there and get all this thing cleaned up and drained. Okay. Here it is, just by trimming the bottom of it, it's kind of chopping the front of the toe off. It almost looks like a horse's foot when you compare it to her opposite foot. We're still not through with it though. Okay. Here we are starting this is the red granulation tissue that we got a little hemorrhage from. Really, it was a normal horse. We'd had blood on everything. Okay. Here we are cutting out all this old necrotic stuff. There's no blood supply there. It's every color in the sun. It's green, it's red, it's purple, it's black, it's yellow, it's orange, and it has a very vile odor. Okay? Here it is. We've got finally get back down to where we find something that's alive. We've got everything up here relieved. We've got our shoe on it at this time. Go ahead. Here it is after we cleaned the foot up. I mean, we're back down to where we've got some pretty healthy, viable tissue. This dark purple or black or blue area right here is just from all the trauma that's taken place in this thing over the past 12 or 14 months. But the mare standing up, you notice again we've got a severely rolled toe on this thing. Okay. We've got our hard bar shoe on there, and actually here's the end of the frog again. You can see your frog. This mare been this way so long that she had a very narrow contracted heel like a lot of these horses get. A lot of people are critical of me because some of these horses don't. I'll put a nail clear back here and I'll say, aren't you worried about narrow heeling a horse? No, I'm worried about saving his life. We can do something about the narrow heel later on. But you can see this point of this frog. Now, this particular mare never laid down again from the time we put these shoes on her. For 28 days, and this mare was doing fine. They turned her out every day. They brought her in at night to feed her at the university. And one night, the students brought her in one evening to put her feet in her grain bin. She was standing there eating and dropped dead. She had a stroke, and I'm sure that one of the blood clots from one of the many ulcers she had from these feet actually broke loose, went through her bloodstream, and went through her brain. She died of a stroke. But she was one of those kind that was going to make it, according to the head of the veterinary science department there at the university. Go ahead. This is just the bottom of the bad foot, showing how raw it is. With these kind of feet, if you're going to work on one like this, you have to have an owner that wants to take care of this horse. You don't just turn this beast out in a muddy lot and not, you've got to bandage these feet, you've got to take good care of them. And if had this mare not had the other complication with the stroke, it would have been 120 days of ICU or intensive care work for the owner or for the veterinarian or for whoever's taking care of them. Okay, go ahead. Okay, that's again the thunderstorm. Okay, this is another mare that some of the boys here are familiar with. It's in Kentucky now. This is a very expensive Arabian mare. The first mare you saw, and this mare came from basically the same area out in the west. And both of them were laying down. They both had reverse wedge pads put on them. And to get this little rotation, everybody wants to lower the heel, raise the toe. When you do that, you actually you contributed to an early cause of death is what you do. When you do have a rotation or a separation or a deep swelling of the lamina between the bone and the wall, if you drop that heel in the acute stage, it puts more stress on the deep flexor tendon and you just pull that bone even further away. Because remember, the reason we've got this rotation or this swelling in there, the bone is no longer attached to the fingernail. So the higher you jack the toe up, or the lower you lower the heel, the more you're going to pull the bone downward. So when you get one and somebody tells you, well, we want to cut all the heel off of this horse, and it doesn't have a deformed foot like some of these you've seen this morning. Say it's acute, but it's got a rotation radiographically. Don't lower the heel. But learn how you can explain that to your owner or to your veterinarian that the reason we have this deviation between P3 and the wall is it's no longer attached to that fingernail. If we lower the heel, the deep flexor tendon is going to pull the bone further away from the fingernail. And I don't know how many of you have seen somebody draw on a radiograph and they want the heel cut down and the toe backed up with a wrap. Well, that's what had happened to these horses. They had the toes raised and heels lowered until the bone was actually prolapsed through the bottom. Then they cut the center of the pad out and that even let the bone fall even further. And then this is what they look like when I get there, okay? This is the front after we get through it the first day. Notice there's very little hemorrhage. These are just pockets, or just like you smash your fingernail and a pocket of blood forms under it. That's all this hemorrhage is right here. On a normal foot, if we'd gone this deep, we'd have blood all over the bone, okay? This is further down the line, bottom of the same foot, this thing looked just like the other one. All of it was removed, or it had already cracked actually. The P3 had already cracked through the sole. So remove it so that you can treat all that necrotic tissue. Notice we've got a real good frog here. Some people say the frog will rot away if you put that shoe on there. That becomes the healthiest part of the horse's foot in 99% of the cases after you use that horseshoe. So here's the same foot. We've speeded it up. How the growth has come down. This is probably 120 days into this thing. We've got a good toe growth. Our lamina's looking real good. Everything's coming back and looking real good at this time. Okay. Here's just a little further on down the line how much toe we've grown in probably a 5-month period. That's how much foot we've grown. We put all these horses on methionine, which I don't want to forget to mention. Methionine is an amino acid that's essential for all epithelial cell development. And again, that's not a $9 word. I just don't want an easier way to say it. But it's essential for hair growth or hair condition, fingernails, hooves, things of that nature. And the way we have been taught to feed it is a teaspoon a day or 2 teaspoons a day. Well, that's just a little bit more than human dosage. So we figured out that about 2 grams per 100 pounds of body weight is the proper dose for a horse. A 1,000-pound horse can feed a fourth of a cup, which is about 20 grams. And that's not too much on a daily basis. And we've done this for years and years and years with no ill side effects whatsoever. And we have another product that we've been experimenting with for the last 4 or 5 years. Dr. Frank Gravely down in Georgia has played with it, and I've been playing with it and experimenting with it. A lot of horses won't eat methionine. He's developed a product, and I'm not endorsing anybody's product, but it's a real good. It's called Neutralife, and a horse that won't eat the methionine, we've had real good results by using that product. But we feed more of it than's on the recommended dosage. It's just got a lot of methionine in it, but it's in an alfalfa meal base, an alfalfa based pellet, so it's more palatable than the straight methionine. I still like the methionine if the horse will eat it better than I do anything that we've got so far as a commercial product on the market. Okay, go ahead. This again is the same filly, just showing how we got even a nice, pretty foot growing back on. Okay. And there she is out running in the pasture, and today she's in Kentucky, and some of the boys here today know this mare. She went back to the show ring and did fairly well, and now she's turned out in a broodmare band. She still wears a heart bar shoe. She probably have to wear this heart bar the rest of her life. You take the shoe off of her and put a pad on her, and the mare gets a little bit creepy. So why take the shoe off when the mare's 100% sound and put a pad on there and watch her creep around a little bit? The shoe's easy to build, and it's no more difficult to build once you get the hang of it than any other kind of bar shoe that you've ever put on a horse. The key to it is the technique of how you put it on. Okay? It's upside down, but that's a foundering airplane. We're coming out of Canada, that's ice. About 1.5 inches of ice on the cowling and on the spinner, and we were rapidly going to the ground if we hadn't gotten down to lower altitude where we get the ice off of it. Okay. Okay, this is Moravian Stallion, 3 years old. This is the first day, as everybody can see. That'll be a better picture in a minute, but you can tell how this fingernail or this wall, it jams this cuticle, and we've got a heel growth but no toe growth. Okay. This is just showing the tool and how we remove this wall. I'll usually make on a light-legged horse like a thoroughbred, quarter horse, Arabian, any of our light-legged breeds. You start about 3/8 of an inch below the coronary band. The hoof wall is the same thickness from the bottom till you get to the coronary crown of the hoof, which is in a light-legged breed about 3/8 of an inch below the hairline. So I usually start making my cut here. I make one down here, here, and here. I go completely through the horny wall And in many cases, I'll go completely down into the sensitive laminal with these 3 cuts, 4 cuts, and then on the real bad cases, the whole thing just lifts out. You don't have to do anything else. It'll just fall out. In this particular case, you still have some basic attachments, but not any good attachments. There again, just you can really see how this is puffy here, how this fingernail is jammy. But back here at the heel, we've got heel growth. Okay. Now then, this horse had a sole abscess, and we knew it had a sole abscess, but rather than opening the sole from the bottom, which sometimes in these foundered horses, you open the sole up and you get a prolapse of the corium, or you get proud flesh growing out the bottom of the foot. So anytime you know that you've got an abscess, and you still have the sole that's intact, try to go in through the front here and open the sole. That's the sole that I'm pushing down with that knife. And then you can take another knife blade and stick it all the way under the sole clear to the heel. So the sole was completely detached, but I wanted to leave it in there just for protection, because every day I'd have a little girl push this down and just inject some betadine back into there, flush it out, keep it clean, and then bandage this thing. But again, you can see no growth here, and heel growth there, okay? If you'll notice, we're cutting on this thing and there's not a drop of blood. This white is the horny laminal. This is the sensitive laminal. In many cases, when you cut in there like that, that laminal will just explode like that, because there's so much pressure and there's so much edema in there. And they get edematous swelling of this lamina just like they'll get edematous swelling of the leg. You know how a horse will stock up and the legs will flow way up? Well, the skin will give. But it's encapsulated inside this hard, horny foot capsule. There's no place to go, so the pressure, instead of pushing the foot outward, pushes inward. And the coffin bone's very porous, and it actually gets so much pressure built up in there sometimes if you don't relieve it, that it kills the blood supply to P3, and you've got a dead horse. Again, this is the horny sole that's laying here. When we opened this from the front, let everything drain out of this thing. At this stage of the game on this horse, this was just serum. It was a reddish straw-colored serum. It hadn't turned into pus. If we'd have left it in there, we would have become purulent, pussy, and we'd have had a lot of problems. But notice how clean this laminal looks. It's all pretty clean. This is a tract that was going up in there, and we just opened it up enough so we knew that we were at the end of it there. But again, you can see where this crack is starting to form here. That foot would have eventually sloughed if we hadn't have gotten the wall ribs moved on the front of it and got the bone stabilized underneath it. Okay. Again, the other foot is showing how you stick your finger between the horny sole and the bottom of the sensitive sole. Here it is, 30 days later. You see, I hadn't even taken the shoe off yet, and I'm lifting that sole up with that knife. You can still stick a knife blade back in under here. But we had all new sole that had grown out to here, as you'll see in a minute. Go ahead. Here it is, 2 months later, 3 months later, how much growth we've got. We ended up hitting a little bleeder down here, but you see these fissures or these cracks that come into this lamina. Each time you reset the horse, get rid of this. Okay, next picture. Here it is, the same foot cleaned up. See, we want to clear to the bottom all those cracks. We got rid of all that, so we have no resistance for that new fingernail. And we've gone to the bottom of the crack, so we know we don't have any serum pockets or hemorrhage pockets that are entrapped in this to cause us problems further on down the road. Okay. There again, the side view of it, how we've got pretty good even growth coming down. This nose-looking thing on there, that some people have asked about this. On some horses, the extensor process, which is right at the top of the third phalanx where the extensor tendon inserts, when you get one that's really rotated, that extensor process puts pressure right in here on the coronary plexus of the foot. So it distorts that foot and makes its nose come out. But once you get everything back in that position and everything's stabilized, then this ends up not being a nose like it just sticks out there just like somebody's nose a lot of times. But don't worry about it, rasp it off, and as it grows down, the new foot won't be that way, or it shouldn't be that way. Again, this is the opposite foot on the horse. This is just an iodine stain. But see, we've got a pretty good toe growth. Everything's starting to even up. We would have never had this had we not resected the front of this foot and stabilized the P3 underneath. That's an Irish horseshoe rig. That's a neat way to see Ireland, but it sure would be expensive if you had to pay the bill. Okay. This is a horse that came from Canada. One of the better barrel racing horses we had. It's a quarter horse. He got a little bit gimpy, you know, and so they put him on some butte. And finally the butte didn't work, so they took him to the vet and they put the conventional pads on him. Never thought about x-raying his feet. The horse immediately got worse after the pads were put on, so we decided to x-ray the horse. They had this terrible rotation, they said, so they put a reverse wedge pad and a nature plate on him. The reverse wedge pad was about 3/4 of an inch thick at the toe. They nailed it on, and sure enough, boy, he really did get bad. So this horse ended up coming from Canada all the way, and he ended up at my place in Lubbock. The reason I took this horse had lived on drugs so long, he had what's called Laminitis. Both jugular veins were just they felt like a 2-inch pipe. They were that hard, you couldn't give him any more shots IV. And this just shows how, when these things get plugged up, how these veins distend on the head. When they unloaded him out of the trailer there, he just laid down in the street, and he hadn't had a drink of water or anything. They tried to water him and couldn't give him any fluids IV. So we pumped fluids via stomach tube down him in the form of Gatorade, about 3 or 4 liters of Gatorade. Finally got him to go to the bathroom. We didn't even work on his feet for 3 days because we were too busy trying to save his life. But this goes to show you that drugs won't fix one of these things. It can't. Once they go into a founder condition, a drug is more detrimental. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen a horse die of view toxicity or view poison, but it isn't very pretty sight on autopsy. Okay. Here again, that's the throat latch, just showing the swelling of the throat latch alone, how it was so great that the hair was coming off. It's just hot, just the fevers and swell and hot, just from the phlebitis of the vein itself. And these pictures were taken in a hurry, but we're trying to get to work on his feet and how he's starting to stand up, and this keeps rolling in place. Here it is. Later on, say 3 months down the road, we're finally getting the toe to start growing. We've got a brand new heel. We've got all this resected out the front. This is the opposite foot. Now, the reason for these is to show by relieving this. In other words, if this fingernail had been jammed clear back to here, then I would have taken that much more of that foot off to relieve this. Every place that's jammed, you've got to relieve it. If you don't, that foot will never grow back in a normal fashion. You notice that this horse really did have a true rotation of P3. He's got a bad velocitis today, but he's sound enough that he won 34 out of 39 barrel races this summer. And the people are happy. They have to keep one foot with a boot on it all the time, so if anything packs up against his sole, it still causes him pain. And I'm still scared to put a full pad on the horse because I'm afraid the sole is real thin on one of his bad feet. So we just keep a boot on him when they're not running. Okay. Here's the front of the foot. This is a different horse the way that sliding that place. This foot is just grown out more and more, and everybody notice I've got a lot of shoe here for heel expansion and a lot back here. Somebody said, well, gee, you got it shot off with short in front. But remember that some of these horses, especially these bad footed horses, it will look like that. It will look like that you don't have the shoe far enough forward. But as long as you've got plenty of support here and on the side, normally I'd have that toe roll way up like this. My breakover point would still be where this is breaking over, but that's the reason that shoe was just scooted back so far. Okay. Again, the opposite front foot showing the side of it, but we've got a good foot growing back, and everything's really adherent and real good. That's the bottom of the foot. It's just got a couple of bruised looking areas here. There's no drainage, but those are the so-called stone bruises that a lot of us see in the horse. And these weren't caused from stones at all. Notice the terrible picture again, but here's the end of the heart bar, here's the end of the frog. You can see your frog, the surfaces of the frog around that thing on the inside. Okay, get that tray number 2 there. While we're doing changing the trays, anybody have a question? I know there's going to be a lot of them.
Let me start dropping fields. I know all pitches are up pretty high, a high degree now.
I'm really not having a heel. It looks that way because there's no post.
Yeah, I understand that, but when you start, in other words, when that grows all the way down, and you have protection and that joint.
Well, when you knock in these, you don't have anything left. You gotta lower the heel. You lower the heel to the maximum every time that on one knock that you've been looking at. Because the only thing that's growing is the heel, so you gotta drop it.
Okay.
But on day number 1, before the foot gets contorted or deformed like those pictures there, radiographically you have this rotation. Don't just trim the foot normal that first day. Don't try to drop the heel on just because you've got a rotation. You see, these horses have all been 45, 60 days. They've already got the heel growth and no toe growth. In the acute early stage, say it's just been 10 days and you haven't had any time to notice any horn wall change to the naked eye outside. But radiographically, you have a swelling of the lamina or you have a rotation. That's when everybody's right then they want to drop the heel. Don't do that in the early stage. Just trim the foot normal, support the bone, and if your rotation is very bad, do your frontal hoof resection and you can get it.
What about a long-standing case where you get them all the
You just saw one. That's what always are. They all have a lot of heels, so you drop it. You drop it then, but you're not worried about realigning the bone by dropping the heel. You realize you're aligning your bones bar. You have to drop the heel on one that's like these.
Let's take about a 15-minute break. I got a lot of coffee, I got a lot of donuts back here. We got Old Folks and 7-Up, they're 50 cents. So coffee, donuts, and free.
You have the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is about a 15. This thing's supposed to die. But when you go 2,000 miles to work on somebody's horse, you at least try and you tell them, say, we'll let her have 10 days if she lives, and you want to keep her some more, we won't kill her. This is a quarter horse mare, 5 years old, stress-related founder condition called just miles and miles and miles. It's one of the leading halter mares on the West Coast. The day she came up with the laminitis, there were in all 4 feet. There were horseshoes, diamond horseshoes nailed on her backward. The next day when she was laying down, they noticed that the sole was bulging a little bit, so they decided to get everything back in alignment, and they put a reverse wedge pad, rim pad on her, and this is kind of what she looks like on day number 1. You notice she's in the prone position and she can't stand up. Okay? That's how loose the walls are. You just peel them apart. This is all the tip of the bone. This thing has been laying down like that for been in this condition about 45 days when I was called to go help another good horseshoe friend of mine in northern Utah with this horse. They're all 4 feet or bad, but all the tip of the bones on all 4 of them was sequestered off, so all the tip of the bone was removed on day number 1. Just keep going. This thing's kind of gory. This is the hoof with the foot with no wall on it, and you can tell again she's laying there. She's got sores all over. Okay. We couldn't put a shoe on her evidently because there's no wall to nail it to. So this is a device that's made out of orthoplast, which is a thermoplastic human casting material. You can heat it in hot water with heat lamps or anything to get it hot and mold it to any shape you want. So we roll a clip here, and we roll a clip here, and here, and here. Then we brad our so-called frog support device in there. And we pad this real thick. This is a Vietnamese emergency field bandage like you get in the Army surplus. pad this real thick, put your medication on it, tape this device to the bottom of the foot. If the horse decides to stand up, most of the pressure is going to be here, and there'll be enough cushion or padding there that you won't disturb the blood supply as bad as you would if you was just standing on something that's hard and solid. This is the foot, the hind foot. You notice the sole's way down here. This whole thing is loose. It's trying to grow a foot, but we're not having much luck that first day, so we end up taking this foot off also, okay? This is a hind foot. We tried to save this hind foot, so by drilling a hole here so we can flush in here underneath this wall, we've got the front of it resected, but it was so loose that we finally lose that wall too after the first 30 days. Okay. Here it is. That's the coronary crown. It started out here. This is 30 days growth. Notice how that growth is. This is all the old necrotic dead lamina. Okay. That's the bottom of the hind foot. This is the third phalanx, and it's mummified. If you've ever seen a bone that's just laying out in the sun, it's all of. I didn't think we'd ever get any blood supply to return to this area at all. We do have a viable frog and a live coronary band. We've got some, notice the rough edges on this bone. Those are where some of the sequesters or the bone chips came off of it. And these people were very determined to save this horse's life. They didn't want to give up on her. She was insured for quite a sum of money, but they didn't want their money. They wanted their horse. So just keep rolling these and kind of go through the progression. This is all the lamina that's down here. We debride that each time. This is new fingernail that's grown out. We're talking about, this picture is about 45 days prior to the first visit. That's how much we nearly got a heel grown on it by this time on that foot. Here's the same foot after we cleaned this up. I wanted to get her standing up a little bit earlier, so I'll be able to plastic foot put on this thing with a heart bar shoe, which was very unsuccessful. It stayed on about 25 days, and then your plastic gets loose because you still have some serious drainage out through this lamina. So that didn't work, so we threw it away and went back to our orthoplast shoe that was taped on. Okay. This is a hind foot. I tried to glue this wall on to try to save it. It didn't hurt me, but it didn't help me either because it made this side grow faster than this side. And so we got good growth down here in the first 60 days on this thing. This is all dried up and looking real good now. The mare's starting to stand up a little bit along about this time. Again, the other hind foot. Well, this is the hind foot. You can see my pink glue running out from here. I tried to glue that wall on. It was dry under there, so I figured we'd try to save it just for a This again is the outline of the third phalanx, and you can scrape that thing and get right down to the bone, and there wasn't any blood there at all. And I just knew that she'd never grow a new foot or a new sole, but as you would progress through these things, you'll see that she finally did. This is the front foot. Here's all new growth. Now this is less than 60 days after the initial time we saw this mare. This mare's still in Nevada when we're working on it. I mean, Utah when we're working on it. Same foot after we clean it up and get ready to bandage it back up. This is close up, showing all the damage. This is, again, iodine stain where the old bruises that were in there, just the tearing and the trauma. This is one of the bad front feet. This is the heel. This is the toe. We had to draw a complete new granulation bed on this thing because this was all exposed bone. And this was really, I think Rusty Brown knows this mare. There she is. You can notice the sores. She doesn't look like the Grand Champion hogger mare in these pictures. There she's finally able to hold her head up once this mare's flight count was 38,000 the first day we worked on her. Everything and all her blood chemistry was out of whack. Her liver was messed up. Her kidneys were messed up. Our muscle deterioration was extremely high. But once we got all these feet completely removed and got rid of all of the necrosis and the endotoxins that get back into the bloodstream through the process of osmosis, got this kind of like blood poisoning, if you want to put it in a simpler terminology. Once we got these feet cleaned up, then her body kind of cleaned itself up. It took several months to do it, but it finally did. This is her feet. So just the hook wall. There in Lubbock, she's in California. Go ahead. This is the bad front foot when it starts to come back together and grow a sole. It grew in a lot different than most of them in the fact that this was all raw tissue, just completely destroyed. And of course, the whole end of the third phalanx was taken off and curated. And so we still had a raw area right in here in front of our frog, but we're doing pretty good. We're getting a lot of heel growth, a lot of deep growth. Here she is when she first stands up, and she's so shaky. This is about 30 days after. These people went out there every hour and rolled in there over, and that was 24 hours a day. That's how she lived. But she's standing up, and her muscles are so out of shape and everything. She's just standing there trembling. But you can see the sores that she's getting on her. Okay, and how she's standing, and she's very depressed. How bad her sores are. This is the hind foot, further along as it's growing out. This is just before we move her back to Southern California. Here she is in Southern California. This is the hind foot. Notice we've got this much growth. This is the first time in 120 days that the sole has covered up that bone in the hind feet. And I don't know, to this day, I don't know how this mare lived or why she lived. I guess it just wasn't her time to die. But there was a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of effort went into saving her life. But I really believe if she'd have had something like to stabilize this bone on day number one, she'd have had bad abscesses, but she would have never gotten in the condition that she did the way she was treated at that time. Because all these horses are treated with reverse shoes or hook gas or something of that nature before I get there, or they have been in the past. So if you can fix one of them as bad as this thing was, well, you know that on day number 5, they're a lot easier to fix than this one. Go ahead. Here she is in California. These are permanent scars that I can't get rid of those. But as we go through this, you'll never believe that these feet even belong on the same horse. This is the front feet. She's standing up. We've got a good foot. This is all lamina here, but it's real hard, keratinous. She can at least stand up now. She's getting around. She's grazing. Okay. These pictures are terrible. I have to really apologize. This is just a side view showing this. We've got that much new horn, and we're talking about in less than 6 months' time, we've got this much foot grown on this particular mare. This is the other hind foot. That's all we like, get it completely grown out. We were able to get a shoe on this mare along about this time because we rolled some clips up here and put a sheet metal screw in up here. We had a heart bar on her. She's now barefooted on the back end. This is the bottom of those bad hind feet. This is still a bruised looking area, but we've got a good sole that's grown in there. This is real red bloodshot, like we see a lot of soles on the horse that we have this bloodshot bruise look. But at least the blood supply returned and came back. This is the foot that I glued on, and you see what it did. The side that was glued on didn't grow as fast as the side that wasn't glued on. So it made the foot a little bit distorted, but it came back and made a good looking foot. But I wouldn't glue one on again if I had to. This is the other hind foot, the first time it's got a sole in it. Many of you know Gunnar Gasky, I'm sure. This is one of the first times I ever saw Gunnar speechless is when we unwrapped this mare's feet in California. Gunnar's not a man that's lost for words, but he couldn't say anything for the first time he did this. He just kind of looked at her. Okay. This is a close-up of the other foot showing that bruised thing. Again, I must apologize for the picture, but we've got a good healthy frog, and this is a good healthy sole. This is the bottom of the bad front foot. The reason for this, by the time we got all this mare's foot grown out, her tendon had become so involved that her heel wouldn't touch the ground. So we did a tendon resection and cut the deep flexor tendon. So we added this egg bud on to keep her toe from flopping up for the first couple of months. But it's hard to believe that that's the bottom of that bad front foot that we started out with. It's almost, I almost can't believe it. There's the bad foot. We still got this seedy area, which we'll never get rid of because we don't have any bone there, so we don't have a matrix to grow any lamina from. So we'll always have that seedy area there. But it's hard to believe that's the same foot that we started with. Here she is without the shoe on. We've already done the tendon resection, and her toe doesn't flop anymore, but we left that egg bar on there anyway for a few more shoeing. That's probably the other foot. What's he doing there? That dog's gonna have cancer if he keeps that up. Okay, this is another mare that some of the boys here are familiar with. This is what I call a sinker or straight vertical displacement of the bony column down through the hoof capsule. When these X-work rays were put on the film, you can't see it. We don't have any deviation between the bone and the wall here. We can tell that the bone is right fixing to come through the foot. But on the regular radiograph, you can see there's this hoof wall that's coming up the leg and this bony column going down through here. Now, a horse that sinks and doesn't rotate or doesn't get the edematous swelling of the lamina will not stand like a foundered horse or a laminitic horse. You know, they all stand with their front feet out in front of them if they're just foundered in front and hind feet up under. One that sinks or has a straight vertical displacement of that bony column, they'll stand up square like a halter horse. They won't have their hind legs camped under them or anything. They'll just be standing there square. And when they walk, they take little bitty short steps and kind of bring the foot out to the side like this. But sometimes they're misdiagnosed. And radiographically, everybody says there's not much the matter with this. Look at the coronary band. You can palpate this coronary band with your finger on these sinkers, and if your finger hits the top of the hoof, it'll stop. If you got a rotation, it will stop there. But a sinker, your finger will stop all the way around the coronary band, all the way around the foot. Now this is the left hind foot, okay? Here's the mare after the foot has been resected. You can see that this sole is completely gone. This is the same left hind foot. Once we stabilize that bone, here's the coronary band now. Here, it was up here. This is 30 days growth. We've got a new fingernail in the point. And a sinker, one that just sinks, will not have the distorted hoof ring that one has with the rotation or the edematous swelling of the lamina. Normally these horses don't live long enough to go to about 30 days. They just walk out all 4 foot and they're defeated and they're destroyed. And anyhow, we got to this mare in 21 days. When we took the front of this foot off, as you'll see in a minute, it was just full of hemorrhage, just solid blood. The wall was not attached anywhere at all, from the heel to the toe. There was no attachment whatsoever, so everything just sunk. Okay. This is the third month. We've got same foot, and I don't have all the x-rays, but they all look the same. This is just the same foot. We've now got growth from here to here. Now look what our lamina's doing. It's growing out here. Our bony column is still in alignment, but now then everybody says, well look, the depth is, the distance is greater from here to here than it is from here to here. Or from here to here. So you don't, this is one of the reasons that you come in here and debride this back each time, so that as this new fingernail goes down, it doesn't have to grow over these. This is real hard at this time when you come back 30 days. It's just as hard as a horse's foot. So cut it back so that new fingernail will go right back in the perfect line. Okay? Now here's her foot when we start on. Notice this bloody spot. When this mare walked, she went squish, squish, squish. She'd take a little bitty short steps. Somebody had to get behind her and whip her to make her go. And she was probably too tough to die. She was a mean old thing. Anyhow, this place had broken open, and this was just bubbly hemorrhage, red hemorrhage coming out of this hole. So she was pretty comfortable on this foot, but this foot, she was hurting real bad. We'll watch what happens. And these feet are not distorted in any way. This is 21 days after the initial onslaught of the laminitis with this mare. This is just showing her hind feet that they look like a normal foot. Take in mind that this mare belongs to a very good veterinarian. Been on Butte for this 21-day period. She had been walked once an an hour for 5 or 6 minutes, 24 hours a day for the first 19 days. So here's what happened. Okay. Here's the hind feet, again, showing that they look normal. This mare is standing there on her hind feet, so doing this number. Okay. So this foot she can stand on better than this one. So here we are making our hoof resection. Okay. Just keep turning, okay. See, it's bloody, but there's no hemorrhage. It's just like if you mash your fingernail, drill a hole in it, what blood comes out and then stops. There's no more capillary action. Roll. There's how hollow it was. The knife blade had been long enough and curved enough you could go clear back to the heel with that. Okay. This is a number 16 capable nail that works a little better than the pocket knife, just to demonstrate how much hollowness is. Absolutely. When this mare stood on this foot, and there's several boys here saw it, the wall would remain stable and everything in here would twist like this. Okay? That's a big-footed mare, and there's the number 16 nail, just to demonstrate how long that thing was and how hollow that wall is back in there. There it is when we got it basically all debrided. It's just all this from all the walking and torn all the lamina loose, so the hoof wall, when you palpated this corner and band, you had a distinct ridge all the way around it. If you just leave that on there, it cuts this beautiful blood supply off at the coronary plexus, and the hoof sloughs off, and then you have a dead horse in most cases. That just shows how much hemorrhage was in the foot. If that would have been a good foot, we'd have blood just running everything. Just keep turning these days. Here's where we're trying to save one of the feet and drill a hole in here so we can irrigate this thing, flush everything out of there, keep it cleaned up. This is the orthoplast material. We don't want to put a heart bar on her because we'll get too much frog compression on the sole. Now, we haven't touched the sole of this mare yet. We hadn't opened it up at all. We've opened it up to the front like we did on the horse I showed you a while ago. Because if we open up the sole, then these two sidewalls are going to do like this. Like on the gray mare that you saw that's laying down, the sidewalls will just do this. So we make our orthoplast heart bar and just tape it to this thing. Okay? There it is. Toe clip, quarter clip, heel clip, and this device. Rat it in there and then put this little Pac-Man thing in here just so that you're not putting something hard. It's more concussion on the sole. Okay? This is just how we're flushing the foot out. This is betadine, just injected back in there to be sure everything's cleaned out. Just keep turning that. Keep going. Okay, this is the foot that is broken up here. We just, rather than take the bottom rim off of here, just the veterinarian was there and you wanted to see, we just cut this out and this whole piece just lifted out and just fall out in your hand. Go ahead. There it is. Just see how much hemorrhage was encapsulated within that hoof capsule. Go ahead. There. You can take your finger now and run up here. This is the hole that you saw earlier. You can just nearly run your finger up underneath that coronary band and run it out the top of that hole. Okay? These are the hind feet. He didn't want to do it as drastic or as radical on the hind feet, so I said, well, we'll just do it enough to save her life for 30 days, and I'll show you what's going to happen. Everything's going to abscess and blow up. He said, that's fair enough. Okay? Well, the front feet, after we get them cleaned up, go ahead. Read these pictures are bad. It wasn't 2 degrees that day. Boy, it was cold. Okay? Again, the hind feet, how we just did it enough to get all the drainage out, open up the sole a little bit here at the bottom, but we didn't open them up enough, as you'll see as we go progress. Go ahead. Okay, this is later on down the road, like 3 months down the road. We got our heart bar on there. Look how much, all this is brand new sole. We've still got an open area in here. This is kind of undermined and hollow right here. This is still an abscess problem. Okay. Go ahead, they're out of sequence. This is the other front foot, the hind foot. This how the abscess and how this new sole is growing in here. There's the old mare when she's kind of on the mend. She's healing up. Her sores are basically healed up. She's nearly got a new foot at this stage. Go ahead. That's just her out in the pasture. Well, this is the hind foot. He didn't want to take as much, open it up as much as we did the front one, so this whole thing got undermined, and sure enough, we had access to the foot out at both heels. And so when we came back for the resetter, redoer, we opened it up here where we could get drainage, some central drainage, and open this up more. Notice that all the abscess problem does is migrate to the corner, to the white line, and go up and disturb our coronary band. This is the hind foot after starting to grow out, gets pretty good. The lamina's dried up. It's still hollow back in underneath this big wall from there down. We tried to save this on these hind feet walls, but we didn't get it done. Go ahead. You see, we've got this much new foot. Here's the hole we drilled to irrigate, try to save this wall or keep the shoe on it, but it eventually comes off. Here's this. Let's demonstrate again that this whole thing is loose. Now, why the shoes even stand on there, I don't know, but it didn't stay on after that day. Some of them are out of sequence, as you can see, and this is from England, and let's move them all out of that cassette. But this starting to heal up. We're able to get a shoe on that foot now. Here it is when she's basically well. That's the bad. You know, this isn't a bad front foot. This is a good front foot. Okay. Here's a bad front foot that had the hole up here when we started. You can notice it's got some distorted areas in it. But even all these distorted areas are now out of this mare. She's barefooted behind it. Jim Simmons down in Kentucky is now shoeing this mare on the front. She could probably go barefooted, but there's no sense in taking a chance on her ever going without that shoe as long as she's going down. That's just another view of her foot when she's well. And there she is, her body condition. Our stores are healed up. And that's the gate to an Irish horse farm. Go ahead. This is a horse that was diagnosed with navicular disease, and they did a hysterectomy on it. We made a bad mistake, and they cut the lateral digital artery instead of the nerve. And the mare really had a laminitis problem, and when they did that, she really got into a terrible mess. I've been working on this particular thing for 90 days, and I still don't have any toe growth, and I'm beginning to get worried. The mare's still this lame as all get out, and I can't figure it out. Radiographically, nothing shows up. So this is all swelled up in here, and I know something's going on, but my radiograph doesn't show me anything, so I don't know what to do. So I have to push on all this real hard, and right here, I'll find a sore spot. So let's go quickly through this. And again, how the hair is coming off from all this swelling, and I'm just where you just barely touch this thing, and this mare can't put her, she's just killed. So I know something's going on here, but I can't figure out what it is. And here it is. When that place I mashed on, I opened it up. Well, when I did this, that's right next to the bone. So I know I've got an osteomyelitis, or I suspect an osteomyelitis. We take a view, x-ray, a dorsal view down through here, and it doesn't show me anything to speak of, but I've also got a sole that won't grow back. And I'm talking about we're 90 to 110, 15 days into this thing, and we've got a heel. Still, my resection is I don't have any toe growth. So go ahead and turn the deal. Be on number 3 cassette. Good. Now this is a quarter horse mare, and another good quarter horse mare that was quite a good halter mare. Had a lot of halter points, and really done the people a good job. And she had the so-called stone bruises in her feet, and so the farrier and the veterinarian took pads on her. Well, every 4 or 5 weeks when they reset her, the stone bruises were still there, only they were a little worse. And the mare was still having to go on bute. It was finally getting to the point where the bute didn't hold the mare. So that's when it was decided that she really didn't have a stone bruise at all, and she had navicular disease, and that's when the problem really got wound up. When they went to doing neurectomies and putting an egg bar with a pad on her, that's when the mare really got bad, and that's when we always get called when they're like that. It's it's nice when you get a hold of one early, because we don't, very seldom you ever see one end up like these horses that you're seeing today. And throw the leg.
She's down.
She was down. Working, go ahead. But this is the bottom of that mare's foot, and all this time I've always been able to, this sole will go out to here. It's always draining. But it never would draw over this area right here. So what we did is just lifted all this up, and I went in there with my finger cuff, and I could feel the bone, the raw bone. So I just took a pair, at the time, a pair of needle nose pliers and just went in there and fished all this bone out of there. And you keep turning it, you see. There's the three big chips that I got out of there, and that was causing all my problems. But radiographically, we couldn't find those things. But you know, if your sole is not growing back, it'll grow up to a certain point and then it won't grow. You know you've got something that's dead, that's necrotic, called live. If it does grow over something that's dead, you're going to get a severe abscess. This, of course, it'll just grow out there and then it'll stop growing, the sole would. So once we got these things out of there and got all that, these were what was causing the fuss that we got at the top. I mean, that thing had a around all the way from where I got these, at the tip of the bone up there to where you saw the pus coming in, okay? This is the good foot. This is 120 days of growth, and I hadn't got anything to heal. I still hadn't had any toe growth that day. That's just to show you what that other foot looks like compared to the good foot. Okay, this is further on down the line, about 60 days after that last set of pictures. Our toes starting to grow. We're starting to get everything evened up here. Go ahead. And here it is, just a little further on down the line. Notice I've got this nose here. Well, that was due to all that swelling, I think, that from that big pocket of pus and all the pressure that was pushing our coronary plexus out. And as this thing grew down, we rasped the nose down off of that thing and grew down here, and we got a pretty nice looking foot up there at the top. This is the foot after it's starting to heal up. Remember, it was like this, and now the sole's growing back in a nice, normal fashion. This is just farther on down the line, probably 4 months after we opened it up here and took the sequesters out the bottom. Here's how much growth. See, this foot was fixing to go bad because she couldn't stand bare weight on this one. So we've got a heart bar on this one, and you can tell we've got some distortion and some rings and some discoloration here. And we did get an abscess in this foot, but that was all there was to it. Just a simple abscess. And here's the bad foot after it's really, still got some bruised looking areas, but that's actually new sole that's grown there. Notice this is not wall. Yes, this is lamina. So, or that old seedy toe that you see, so you go back in each time and grind that back so that new fingernail can come back down normal in a normal fashion. There it is, just the next time we went to work on the mare, good hoof growth back finally. And again, the front of it, how much it's grown. There it is, nearly grown out, but as it grew down each time, we took this back. Wrap this wall off. Each time you shoe the horse, you finally get a good foot. There she is. She can actually stand on that thing barefooted. And that's a hard one to figure out. There was a lot of veterinarians that worked with me on that thing, and none of them could figure it out. And And then when I finally decided we were going to jerk this sole up and go in there, well, they wanted to ask me, one of them said, well, aren't you worried about getting that thing infected? You know, now shouldn't you clean that up and wear gloves? Now, on a horse's foot, even if you keep it bandaged, you can't keep it from stepping in the manure. So sterile technique on a horse's foot, be as clean as possible, but some of the guys are a little overboard I believe in being clean too when you're working on those things, but sometimes you just can't help it if you're in a barn yard. And like most of them are when I get there. That's a gypsy camp circle in Ireland. This is a horse that survived the blister beetle in Texas, and he lost all 4 feet. I'm sorry that I don't have the pictures of him when Chuck Young borrowed the first set of pictures we had on these, and he still got them, but this is after he's nearly well. And he surviving the blister beetle in the alfalfa hay was a feat of its own, but then when he foundered in all 4 feet, one of our farriers there in Texas put heart bars on him within 3 days of his initial insult with the laminitis, but he didn't realize that the horse was trying to sink on him, and the horse never did rotate, but he got severe abscesses, and when we first went down to work on him, it was late at night, and we opened the front of this thing up, and we got at least a cup of this pus out of each foot, and he did live. He made it all right, and he's got 4 new feet now, and he's doing super. But if our farrier friend hadn't put his heart bars on, we probably lost this horse. And he belongs to a veterinarian, and the veterinarian is very happy, or his wife is, that we at least tried it. And of course, the farrier that put the heart bars on knew very little about it, and the veterinarian who owned the horse knew very little about it. And of course, when the horse abscessed and got so sore, they re-x-rayed it, and the horse hadn't rotated, and they couldn't understand what all was going on inside that hoof capsule. And so when we went down there and opened this thing up, and everything just gushed out, well, then they understood what had happened in there. If they hadn't had their heart bar on there, the thing would have sunk and would have probably lost a lot of the bones in the horse and killed him, and he probably wouldn't have ever been worth a quarter. This is just how much foot he's grown out. We drilled a new foot on that thing in about 5.5 months, all 4 feet. We're barefooted now behind, but we do have heart bars on his front end. We have a lot of pedilosteitis in both front feet, which is just a real rough edge around the peripheral edge of B3, but he'll be all right for their little baby or their little kids to ride around. A lot of them will good. This is just the bottom of his foot showing how terrible picture of how raw it was one time. That's him walking around. He doesn't have shoes on there. We had him bandaged up with that orthoplasty. Go ahead. Keep going. That's a little grindstone over in Ireland. This is not a laminitis case, but we see a lot of this in Texas, where you have a coronary band laceration, and this horse had hung this foot under a steel gate when he picked it up, so it ripped all this wall off, and they rushed it to the vet with it all bandaged up, and he looked at it and said, you might as well put it to sleep. It was never growing this foot, and they brought it up there all bandaged up with duct tape, and here's what we did to it. Take the shoe off. This is part of the lateral wing of the third phalanx was. We just lifted it out, threw it away, curetted this bone. This is the coronary band. The whole thing was torn loose like that. It's a gilding. So I said, well, how much money are you going to spend? That's half of the third phalanx there laying on the ground. This is after we got it all cleaned up. We leave this part of the old frog. That's the sensitive frog there. Notice there's not much blood now at all in this thing. This is all the soul is gone, all the walls gone on the outside. Okay. Here it is. This is what it looks like. We put I don't know why I picked it in there. We put what we call a half-bar shoe. Just a shoe like that. It comes around and covers the frog. It takes all the bearing weight off of that wall, but it protects it because there wasn't any wall left there. and we bandaged the whole thing, put the weight on the frog and on the good part of the hoof, and bandaged the thing up, and that's what it looked like when it got well. And that horse went on back and made it a successful using horse. He got a problem in the knee about a year after this was done. They thought it was in the foot because he did have a bruise spot on his foot that never did disappear. When the vet took the x-ray down from the dorsal view, he said, well, no wonder this thing's lame. He said, there's not any bone on that side of it. The horse had a carpal chip and it wasn't his foot after all, so the horse is still doing good. Go ahead. This is that Irish horse shouldn't wave again. Okay, this is one that's only been supposedly had laminitis for 6 days. This is a real expensive German warm blood. This horse could not be saved under probably any circumstances. He was one that sunk, and they sunk in all 4 feet, all due to stress. He was flown from Europe to New York, spent the night, loaded on a trailer, hauled up to the Midwest. Got off the trailer sore. They put hard bars on him. The horse went immediately sound. They rode him about 6 or 7 days. The horse never took another lame step. The trainer said, get those things off. He can't walk good enough. He can't do a dressage horse. They pulled him off, put a conventional shoe on him, loaded him in a trailer, and shipped him to Florida for a big dressage circuit. Well, he gets to Florida and he kicked the trailer and he capped the hop and they put him on steroids. Of course, he was out of commission because his hop was bad, so they put him on the trailer to Florida and shipped him back to the Midwest. He gets off the trailer and he can't hardly walk, so the veterinarian and the horse here come put a heart bar on him. And they just put him on the front. They didn't realize anything was going. They took pictures of him, no rotation. Same thing, though, it showed up at the coronary band, but she didn't realize what the coronary band readout on her radiograph was. Well, the horse stayed in the stall, didn't stand too bad. The next day they came out and picked the foot up. Boy, this bar is really compressed into the frog. She called her farrier up and comes back out and says, we've got too much pressure on him. So they take the shoe off, lower the bar, nail it back on. Horse doesn't, no change, but he just stands there. He's standing there eating. So then they re-x-rayed the horse. Still not realizing the next day when they x-rayed it, they weren't paying any attention to anything but the bone in the foot. They weren't seeing what they were doing to the hoof capsule. Well, they did this for 6 days. Every other day they lowered the bar because it looked like it was putting too much pressure on the frog, and each day they did this, they x-rayed the horse. So this is day 8, and they called me. Well, I get there, it showed up. I looked at the radiographs first, and it explained what they'd done. Every time they lowered the bar, it lowered the bone, and it raised the hoof up the leg. So when I explained this, the lady veterinarian is very sharp and very good veterinarian. She says, you know, it's very plain when we see that. But this was a real heavy horse, and his foot wall had jammed this coronary plexus so long that you could stick a scalpel blade in it a half an inch, and you didn't get a drop of blood. This thing is not fried loose. It was just cut down here, and I just cut across around the white line here and just lifted the whole thing up. It was no longer attached. This is just showing how to take your nipper so that you can look in underneath the sole of what's happened underneath the sole in a period of less than 10 days. Go ahead. That's how loose it was. You notice there's no blood supply. This lamina it was just starting to swell a little bit. This is the horny lamina, sensitive lamina, and you can, in a minute, it shows how much that leg is sunk down into that hoof capsule. Okay. Again, this is the coronary crown of the hoof, the horny lamina. Here's your coronary plexus. Anywhere you stuck a needle or a knife, you never got any bleeding. So you know you're whipped right there. If you have completely lost the blood supply to that coronary plexus, don't try to put one of these beasts through all the misery. Because he cannot grow under the hoof. It's just like putting a rubber band around a lamb's tail. You leave it on there too long, the tail falls off and it doesn't grow back. Okay? Here it is, how loose it was. I mean, actually nearly put your finger in there. Granted, this horse weighed probably 1,600 pounds, This is your coronary plexus. Here's your coronary crown. Here's where your lamina start. That's where they stop. Here's your soul. There's your coronary crown, where your lamina start. And no blood supply whatsoever. But it was really hard to kill this horse. This horse was never laid down. He's standing up. But he took steps about that long. Again, he was a sinker. Go ahead and flip that. You can see how these lamina are starting to swell. Well, those things are supposed to be less than 1/8 of an inch, and they're that thick, they're 1/4 of an inch thick when you lift that up. But again, no blood supply whatsoever there. That was my decision to lay this horse down for good, because I couldn't grow him a new fingernail. Go ahead. See how dark that blood is? And I mean, there's no blood supply. He still had a blood supply of the bone. We were whipped on account of this up here. And this is what I'm talking about when you palpate the coronary band. I don't know why I didn't start. This is when he was, before we laid him down. But you see how my fingers go in behind that? And if you do that all the way around, you just have a distinct depression, crevice, ridge, whatever we want to call it. This wall on that heavy son of a gun was just going up here. Even though they had their heart bar, each day they lowered their heart bar, the more he sunk. And they didn't realize, I doubt if they could have fixed this horse if they hadn't done anything, because you can't get so much compression on the frog that you will cause a pressure necrosis to the frog, and especially on a horse that weighed as much as this. But this thing wanted to live. It's just, you know, and he was insured for a lot of money. But that's what the guy was trying to save the horse if we had a chance. Again, this is back in the area of the quarter. You can see how deep my fingers have gone down into that, behind that coronary crown of that hoof. So you know that you're pretty well. That gray mare a while ago that sunk, she was this bad, but she had a thoroughbred kind of a foot, and her frog hit the ground right quick. She had a big old round flat foot, so she didn't sink down inside this as deep as this German warm blood that had a big cup in his foot. He just kept sinking, and each time they lowered their bar on the radiograph, it showed up just exactly what was happening. Okay. This is the radiograph, but they don't transfer very good on the slide. See, here's the heart bar, and how far they've got it cocked up in there. You can see that the horse had a good cup, and on the real radiograph, you can see around here where it's starting to slide up the leg. The next one was taken 2 days later, and it still doesn't show up, but you can see this blackened area. The bar, the bone is now further. There's not as much clearance here. This could have something with an angle of the radiograph, but on the true radiograph, you can see what was happening here. The skin would be like that, and then the foot would be like that. Okay. This is the last radiograph. Again, you can't see it, but this bone's getting lower and lower each time they lower this thing. But this is the only place on the first radiograph that you can tell what was happening. You can supplement that diagnosis problem by just palpating that coronary band like I was doing in that particular 2 slides where if your finger goes down behind that hoof wall, you better do something in a hurry because you're fixing to get in trouble. Okay? Irish horse corn. Now, when you get called to work on something like this is why you get in trouble trying to help somebody over the telephone. And the man didn't have any money, and he lived 1,500 miles away from me. And so you're trying to help their farrier and their veterinarian and the owner over the telephone, and normally I'm not there, so I call these people back. It's my nickel when I call back, not there. Well, they built some pretty good hard bar shoes, but they forgot to put any pressure on this thing. And so she was in bad shape when the girl horseshoer that called me, and the owner, she was already down when they started to work on her. Well, finally, when the man decided that he wanted to call me, it's 5 or 6 months down the line, and this is, you could actually smell this beast. It smelled dead, and I had several farriers that flew over there with me, and we'd gone a long way, so we decided we could try. We told the old man, said, we ought to kill her right now, but let's try. If she's still alive in the morning and she'll stand up, we'll try to give her 2 or 3 more days and see what happens. So we'll roll through these real fast. I mean, the whole thing's falling apart. You can see the deep flexor tendon where it inserts on the bottom of the third phalanx there. The whole thing's just falling apart on each foot. Just roll this thing real fast. This thing back. You can just peel that foot off like it's dead. And here, see, over the phone, I said, how much pressure do you have on your heart bar? She said, well, I don't think we've got too much. And I said, well, stick a tongue depressor under it. See, well, that's their idea of putting a tongue depressor under it. It didn't work, you can see. But I don't think, this is just some of the bone chips that we've taken out of each foot. We just took out handfuls of them. The bone was dead. It was awful. Why anybody would let the horse go this far is, well, the thing was 20 years old and they'd raised it from an orphan, and you know the old story. It wasn't worth it. But it was a good lesson in the anatomy. The sores were so bad that when you move the legs, you can see how all the tendons work and feel the ligaments and you can see the hip bone. But no kissing going on. Yeah, but before I got back home, this mare got up. She never got up while I was there. Before I got home, this guy called my wife and said, oh, I said, it's just a miracle. I said, she's standing up. I said, well, she probably felt a little better. She's standing up. Just hurt her to bed. She didn't want to lay back down. Of course, she died the next day or two. They put her down. And it's pathetic to let one suffer like that. Well, let's try to see something more interesting than that. Oh, that's the English Army Farrier School. That's the great David Gully. He's in there instructing. This is a very interesting case. You might know, this is the reason I brought this one. This mare is a good thoroughbred mare, and a lot of the boys down in Kentucky know this mare. Some of them worked on her before she got this bad. This happens to be the way she was when I was called to work on her. The mare was laying down in northern Michigan at the time. If you'll notice, though, this is the coronary band and this is the top of the second phalanx. There is no third phalanx. This is what's left of the navicular bone. This is about 4 weeks after the initially worked on her. We've got a hook ball that's gone from there to there. When I got there, she was so far in the sticks, they didn't have an x-ray of it. Of course, as you'll see in a minute, this foot did a funny number. And I didn't have an x-ray. If I'd have seen the x-ray the same before I started, I might have said, let's kill her. But, anyhow, go ahead. Here she is laying down. This is the bottom of the foot. And this is one where the veterinarian told me, he said, well, you can't cut this down because it's quick. You get her to bleeding quick there. Well, poor old beast couldn't stand up. She hadn't grown any toe on this foot in probably 2 years. Go ahead. This is the side view of it. Notice how this, you can really see what's happening. No toe growth. This is all like a ram form. This is all swelled up, very extremely sore. When the mare does stand up, she stands on the back part of this thing. The other leg is gone, so you can go ahead and turn. Here it is when I get through with it. She's standing up on it barefooted even, but you don't really have to worry about supporting the third phalanx in this thing. It's nothing left to sink or drop or rotate. That's a pretty good foot when considering. Well, here's what I was worried about is all these things. So not having a radiograph, I know I've got a problem in there, so I just take a scalpel blade and I just stick in those things. And when I squeezed on these things, I just got good yellow toothpaste and it went out on the ground. I flushed this thing here and it came out down here, and flush it here and it come out over here. And just a syringe, and I said, well, we tried, cowboys. But go ahead, keep going. This is kind of what it looks like after I lanced these places. Ended up having to go back in there with, if you remember on this first x-ray, there was a sequestered piece of bone on the second phalanx. Well, that's what was causing all this. Anything dead in there is going to cause more necrosis and more abscess problems. Go ahead and count right quick. As you can see, she had a lot of sores, and that's that foot the same day. This foot, if you'll notice, she's got a terribly bad knee over here. The inside of this foot would not touch the ground. In other words, her bad knee had made her walk so long that way that this foot didn't touch the ground anywhere except on the outside wall. Go ahead. Just keep turning them. Maybe I'll go. Well, anyhow, the mare's still doing fine today, and Jim Sibley can. I've got some other slides on her. I'm sorry I don't have them with me, but she has grown a pretty decent kind of foot. We have to keep the front of it cut back because there's no matrix for the fingernail to grow to. We do have a thing that kind of looks like a horseshoe on her. We got the other foot fixed. She's bred, Orange happy, and she's happy. But those are the kind that are really tough to fix. And we learned what to do for them a little early on, and maybe we can prevent that for 10 years to ever see some of the problems that you people have seen on these slides. Let's see what's next on this thing, maybe. Oh, it's just an old wire cut. Just thumb through it. There's one I want to show you. Just keep going until it runs completely out. Go ahead. Oh, hoof cast. This horse has been to several veterinarians. It's an insurance case that had a plaster Paris hoof cast on it. The horse was down. They called and said, come fix the horse and see what's the matter with it. I get there and this is the x-ray I've got. Notice the gap, the huge gap that we've got between P3 and P2. When they put this plaster Paris cast all the way around from the bottom of the foot around this wall and left it on there for 21 days and everything swelled up inside there, it killed all the blood supply to the bone and it turned all the ligaments loose. And that's about, I did something like 14 of them in the last 18 months and they all died. In fact, one of them, when you take the cast off and this coffee-colored fluid running out from the coronary band all the way around, you twist the foot like this and hand it to them with that bone still in it and you don't have any blood. This was a very expensive horse, and he probably would have, I can't say the hoof cast did, but I never fixed one of them yet that had a hoof cast on. They get the dirt black needle and they're killed. Because all the ligaments kills these, then that bone separates from this bone, okay? Just another view showing the same thing. And here it is 10 days later. We gave him 10 days. See, you can just take that thing and there's nothing's holding it. I don't even know why it stayed on that one. I've already cut the front of his foot off. This is go ahead. There again, see how that gap is in there. You kill those ligaments, you kill the bone, you kill the ligaments, they turn loose and you're whipped. And that's what a lot of the times that's what the hoof cast does. You won't even do that much damage with a pad of silicone. Go ahead. It's RX Farm pressure. Okay, now I want to show you one more quick series on that last thing, and I want to show you that a dead chicken hanging on the wall won't pick one up either. I went to a place to work on a horse that's been laying down for about, I don't know how many months, and I walked into the stall, and the horse looked like he was dead, all right, don't get me wrong. There was something that really smelled bad in this stall. So I look around, there's a bunch of old green blowflies running around in there. I looked up and there's a dead chicken there with a wall, you know, it doesn't have any feathers on its breast. Maggots crawling in and out of it. And I said, what's that stinking thing? I threw him out and everybody's eyes got big and they quit talking and shut up. Well, they had a voodoo doctor come over. They took this chicken and plucked the breast feathers off of him and they rubbed it all over this horse. Now this is a true story. They wrung the chicken's neck, put him on a wall, and that's supposed to get all the evil spirits out of this horse. But as you can see from this series of slides, it didn't do him damn good. Well, where are we going? They have to run it back. I don't know. Good, but this is a good one. It's all necrotic and everything, but it's still kind of got some attachments back here towards the heels. Of course, it's all gone. This is the back foot. This fingernail is jammed in under all this stuff. The horse has been barefooted. They at least didn't try to put too much. They tried to pad on him, and that didn't work, so they just let him barefoot. This actually, the hoof is actually underneath all of this. Well, I told the lady out in the man, I said, I don't really think we can do much, but I've come about 4,500 miles to work on him, so we're going to try to go keep going. That's what he looked like as far as his body. That chicken didn't help him too much. This is the other side of him. He was a dead horse. It was just pathetic. Okay. That's after we kind of got it cleaned up. We ordered this stuff, had it flown in, and had some fancy bedding thrown in, and all a bunch of other stuff that's wet in the road. Here he is just a couple of days later, and we're treating this horse is just hot. Serum was just coming out on all of these sores, just like a burn victim, if you ever seen anybody burn bad. So we're treating these things with zinc oxide and Malox and mix it up and put it in a paste. This Malox like you drink, and that's what we did to these things. And I said, now we'll give this horse 10 more days to suffer, and if he doesn't show some marked improvement for 10 days, let's kill him. Keep going. Now we got him laying on these foam rubber pads. That's how he stayed for quite a while, 3 or 4 days anyway. That big huge sore here. Go ahead. But at least now he's raising his head up. This is about day number 5. Before he wouldn't even raise up. He would not raise his head up. This lady would want to feed him by hand. And nobody speaks English there, and I had more trouble than a one-legged man in the kicking contest. We did get a veterinarian that spoke a little English, and he ran some blood work, and we finally got this poor old beast dehydrated. We got some fluids in him, got him where he can hold his head up. And we're still talking now in the first 10 days from this is going. Okay? This is just the next day. That's the bottom of a good foot. Doesn't look too bad on the bottom yet. Keep going. Here's the sole. I left the sole. You can just grab the sole, pull it down here, and I left that in there for a purpose. Of course, we'll put an orthopad shoe on it to manage all this up. This is the real good foot. There he is standing up about 6 days later with these Malox all over him. Okay. There's the bad foot. 12 days later, and I didn't think we'd grow on that fingernail, but that's what a new foot looks like when it starts to grow. Of course, you have to keep, there's no lamina left here. This is a granulation bed. You have to watch it that it doesn't become inclusion or proud on you. And this is the sole well left intact. When you pull this sole down, this part of the wall would actually pull back like a hinge. But I left it so I could keep that sole there just for added protection. Now, let's see if there's another picture. Now this is about 15 days later, the good foot. And that's the sugar and the betadine, the sugar dime that we put on that thing. And the reason we use that, it doesn't cauterize anything. The sugar is very hydroscopic. Bacteria cannot survive in sugar medium. And you mix betadine scrub with it as an emulsifiant. You just mix it up about the consistency of honey. And it's the best thing I've ever found, and you utilize it to treat wounds or treat these old suppurating terrible feet. It doesn't do like iodine or methylate, cauterize anything. It keeps that fluid pulled out of that foot, and it heals up real good. It's the best thing I've ever found, and it's used in human medicine for the treatment of osteomyelitis. So it's not a quack live tale that came from some Bohemia or somewhere. It's really used actually in human medicine. Okay. That's just a picture of the good foot. Okay. That's the bad foot. 15 days later, we had to come back in there and cut this off. But we're getting a good hoof growth. Okay. This is the front of the bad foot, showing the new fingernail starting. All this old stuff here, we just cut it off. There's no blood. It didn't bleed. Just calcium. Just more like gristle or cartilage. The same day, showing the sole with now this is new hoof growth, and I didn't think that would happen. Okay. Side view the same day. And that's just a scalpel blade showing that's the horny sole and it's hollow all the way back into there. And that's the bottom of the bad foot. This is bad tissue. It's exuberant. We have to control that by the use of silver nitrate with sticks, and we got it under control before it got out of control. Because if you let it get sticking down, it's real painful. It's not like crab flesh on some other part of the body. It's highly infiltrated with nerves because it's growing right off the bone. Okay. Here he is, 25 days later, he's standing up. Notice what he's sore. This is all brand new hair that's grown on this poor beast. And about this time, I'm saying let's try to save him. That's the veterinarian standing back over in the corner. Okay. He moved his head, but this was to show all the swelling of the veins where they've kept this poor old thing alive on everything from morphine to whatever else you can buy over there in a foreign country. He was on his high at 50 cc to be dissolved in a day. And he was still laying down. So if you know your bute, your morphine, and your Banamine, if they're still laying there, it's not doing them much good. So don't give it to them. They're trying to tell you anyway, my feet hurt. Okay? And this again, just showing in a 25-day period what he's gone from, just by cutting those feet off. The only thing we've got on the bottom of him is that orthoflats thing. It's obvious that we couldn't put a shoe on this horse. And of course, the people in that country and all veterinarians said, you can't do that. You can't cut his foot off. Well, it's already off. Why not get it off so we can give him at least a chance to grow a new one? Anyhow, the horse is doing fine today. He's trying to breed all the mares on the farm. Go ahead. Keep going. And this is the first time, come to find out, in this country where they don't speak English, I finally got somebody to tell me the truth that could speak English. That's the first time that horse has been in that stall for 5 months. And of course, the lady that owns the horse, she's very happy. Her husband is unhappy because she moved in with the horse. And so, right before last, he called and he'd been in a wreck on a bicycle, head on by an automobile, and was in the hospital with 2 badly broken legs. And he called me and said, you need to get back over here. And I said, well, I need to get over there for just there last week. He said, the horse is doing fine. I want you to come treat my wife. So, she's a real nice lady, but she fell in love with this poor beast. And for about, this is 5 or 6 months ago now, and she's just now getting where she go to the house. She slept. He moved her trailer house out there. She lived with that horse, and didn't know anything about a horse before this happened. Go ahead. But anyhow, that's it. I'm not trying to say anything about the way we've done this, but if we would learn what to do early on, we wouldn't have to see this many of these kind of horses. And I know all of you see a lot of sores on them, but if we learn to support the bone through the frost, it really works, y'all, and it works. Somebody's going to figure out something better, and I hope the sooner it is, the better, because I want to be the first one to congratulate you. I know some of the things we've done in the past did not work with any consistency. Some people say this doesn't work with any consistency, but the ones I've seen put on, nothing like what I've tried to teach. They don't even resemble a hard horse shoe that I've made. And the earlier you can get to them, the sooner, the better off you are. A lot of people say, well, he's not ready for a hard horse shoe. He hasn't rotated yet. That's when you want to do it. My analogy of that is, if you have a hairline fracture. You walk around on it without doing something about it, then it becomes more than a hairline fracture. So don't let them get bad. They may all abscess on you, but if you put the shoe on right, I assure you that the shoe didn't cause the abscess. And a lot of people think it does. You know, after 8,000 or 9,000 head of them, and why are they all abscess when you start, and when you get through, they're not abscess anymore. So it's a very hard thing to teach, and it's not because I haven't tried to teach it. I know some of you have tried one and failed. Seen other people try them and they failed. But maybe it was the application of the technique. I fail on a lot of them too, but I think you can see why I have to count those that die on my percentage of saving and dying. But I haven't lost hardly any when we got to them in the early stages. It's just that I don't get to them too early unless they're in West Texas. And sure you get to them. But I don't think we've lost any kind of horse with laminitis that anybody has asked for help on out there in a long time as far as them not in place to veterinarians know what to do. And they just get it done. So we don't see quite as many of these bad ones. I know right down the road here in Kentucky, I don't know what happened to all those horses 7 or 8 years ago. I guess they all died because they've got them running out their ears down there where they have a high concentration of horses. And the boys have been down there a long time, so yeah, we'll just kill them. Just put them to sleep. Yeah, I mean, we haven't lost 2 or 3 down there in 5 years, have we? What's the difference? They don't know, but we've lost a few, but the ones we've lost either were sick internally and we couldn't reverse it. And we've probably got over the past 5 years, probably worked on the past 300 or 400 head of them down there in that area. And we're back some pretty good records down there. Any questions, or let's go eat first and then have some questions?
What makes them like that out of the beginning, or is it just...
Okay, when you have such a tremendous insult all at one time, say you lose 100% of your lamina at one time, and you don't have time. And most of these things are either a postpartum laminitis or severe toxemia or salmonella infection or one that's really been stressed and messed with. Most of them, they've got to really be a hot infection, in other words, a toxemia or septicemia or poison of some kind that kills 100% of that. In other words, 100% of the lamina, the blood's cut off at the same time.
It won't sink it like, that's part of the question is, if they sink, it go all the way around the bridge and all, but the other thing, here I do a lot of it on my pound, because we deal with use my glass ones, use the hard block down, but I have used the reverse shoe. It's really good.
You've been lucky.
Okay, that's not wrong.
Now, did you really have a founder horse, or do you have a laminitis? If it's an old chronic thing, then it's already stabilized and the bones are mineralized and all that, but it's standing up. The reverse shoe will help because it just makes the thing break over and you back and toe up. But you still haven't better luck if you just put a little bit of support on the problem and you can put much because you're not trying to move the bone in the chronic, you're just trying to hold everything stable.
Well, we've got some big holes in front, take the whole front of the fall off, but we don't have any pressure between the pad and the sole. Some of them have a sole, but I mean, as far as jamming that, cutting off circulation, the only place we've got pressure is right on the wall.
Well, if you've got an old chronic, you don't have a jam corner band anymore. I mean,
well, I'm talking about a one that kind of like maybe in 5, 6 weeks it's been down and they don't know what's going to go from goes down and they call it flat. And it seems like a real recent boundary and we'll put the reverse on it. And you don't get, like some of the chronics, it seems like immediately they're like successful. These other ones, it takes a while. It seems like maybe they're just coming out fast.
well, I had worked on about 60 in the last 18 months that had a shoe nail going backwards, and they were all laying down. They were one of them. And, you know, that was done, it works, but with what percentage of consistency?
Maybe we have to look back at about 10 of them. I'd say all but one of them, and then I went to the park farm for one, so what things stood up with, because some other problems with it. But then, maybe we get this,
That's the way. I mean, I used to do the same thing. I tried down, but I never got any consistent results. 3 of them would get well. Say, boy, I've got it now. But the next 4, they got worse. It's consistency with it.
well, once it got well, why do you think that you didn't have the salt pressure cut off the blood supply, what you really had trouble with? Like we left it to help the frog all the time, maybe actually that dictated back foot pressure on the frog was helping support them with the clearance up towards the toe. You got the whole toe chopped off, and I mean, you could stick, 1/4 inch back in between the sole and the pad. You never hit anything. So maybe in essence it was doing something similar to the hard ball, maybe just not as.
Yeah, you may be that.
Because I just can't understand why some of them do so well with the first one.
Well, I never could either, but like that, you saw 2 of them that had reverse shooting on in this thing, and boy, it laid them on the ground. They're really active, and they're gonna drop the founder. They'll come pretty quick. And they'll come within 48 hours and come through the bottom. And if they're really active, you put that shoe on. Same with an egg bar. It works sometimes, but with what consistency? Okay, does that kind of answer?
Yeah, that's